All right. And without further ado, Max, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amanda. So welcome everyone to the first session in our series. And today's session is Mindset Shifts to Achieve Operational Effectiveness. My background a little bit, I've been doing this for 38 years. A lot of this information took me 38 years to understand, and it's a lot of experience of knowing what to do and, more importantly, knowing what not to do. And basically, we're going to go through the framework of operational effectiveness today. And also joining me is Delana Rupp, that she helps me with my organization with doing these types of events, marketing, and bringing services to organizations.
Welcome,
And
everybody.
so starting off, we're going to talk today about the necessary and sufficient conditions to become a high-performing organization. So a lot of things I do, I focus on these two elements, necessary and sufficient. So what is necessary? So every organization should have some goal that they're trying to achieve. So necessary means that we have the correct elements in place in order to achieve that goal. So if we have a goal, what are the necessary conditions that we need in place to achieve that goal? So a lot of organizations we go into might not have the necessary things in place to achieve their goal. And then the second thing is, are they sufficient? So sufficient means, is it delivering the correct results? So we need both. We need the necessary elements in place, and they need to be delivering the correct results. So a lot of things we do, I'm always focused on necessary and sufficient. And today we're going to talk about what are those elements to become a high-performing organization. And of course, the focus of this session is mindset. So it's so critical that we have everybody in the same mindset, because what I see in a lot of organizations, what's blocking them from being a high-performing organization is what is between our ears. So if we don't have the same mindset, we have people with different mindsets, we don't have alignment, we don't get alignment, then we're not going to achieve our goals. So that's the basics of today's session. So I'm going to start out by talking about organizational excellence. And I'm not going to try to define it, but I'm going to outline the framework of what it is. So if you Google operational excellence or organizational excellence, you're going to find 100 different definitions. And if you talk to different people have different definitions of what's organizational excellence or operational excellence. So the framework is what I'm going to focus on here. And it really starts with the customer. So depending on what your organization does, and I have a lot of companies say, oh, can we do organizational excellence or can we do operational excellence? And my question is, do you have a customer? If the answer is yes, then you can do operational excellence. So it starts with the customer. And with the customer, we have different needs. So different customers have different needs, different markets have different needs. So we need to understand the needs of the customer. So that's the first condition, is that we understand the needs of the customer. If you don't understand the needs of the customer, and I'm amazed how many companies don't understand the needs of their customer, that's the first thing we need to do, is what's the need of the customer? Those needs feed into the organization. So this is in the form of input, process, output. So the inputs are the customer needs, the process is what your organization does to satisfy those needs, and then the output is some level of customer satisfaction that you provide to your customers or to your market. And when we look at this level of customer satisfaction, we promote the blue ocean strategy, which is trying to create uncontested market space for your organization. So there's the red ocean where everyone's fighting for the same business. There's the blue ocean where you have uncontested market space. So the goal is to provide more value than your competitors or what your customers can get from a substitute product or service. So the goal is to give that value that's nobody else is giving in the market. And that starts with understanding those needs. Inside the organization, we have 3 primary functions. So I don't care what organization you are, if you're a manufacturing company, a service company, a healthcare company, you have these 3 core functions. So you have finance, which measures how the performance of the organization is doing. You have sales and marketing that are going out and looking for customers, new markets. Then you have your operations that are converting the requirements of your customers into services or products. And then these functions need to work in conjunction with one another. So a lot of times I see conflicts between these functions. And when we have conflicts between the functions, that's preventing us from being a high performing organization. So a lot of times I see like finance saying, oh, we have too much inventory in our system. And sales is like, we don't have enough inventory. I don't have the things I need to sell. It's like what we need to sell, we don't have in stock, and we don't have enough inventory. Or sales and marketing, like, oh, we need to get this order out as soon as possible, or we need to put people on this project ASAP to satisfy the customer. And operations, like, we already got all our resources on other projects, right? So it's like we have all these conflicts between the functions in the organization. So one of the goals is to understand what are those conflicts, then how do we break those conflicts? And so it's leadership's role to make sure that these three functions operate in conjunction with one another and that there's no conflicts between these functions. So this is a basic framework for operational excellence. Understanding needs of the customer, those needs feed into the organization. We design the internal organization to satisfy those needs, and then our output is some level of value that we're providing better than all our competitors, which gives us that competitive advantage in the market. Next, I want to move to my house of operational excellence. So again, it took me 35 years to develop this house because it was 35 years of understanding what not to do. So a lot of organizations understand what they need to do, but then we deploy a lot of those strategies and then they don't achieve the results. And then we got to go back and understand, why didn't we get the results that we were expecting? And if we don't do that analysis, we're never going to learn from those experiences. So what I want to focus on here is the foundation piece. So the main reason this is set up like a house is because a house is only as strong as a foundation. So if we don't have a strong foundation, then the house isn't going to stand. The other two things that are important to this house is that I only have two pillars. So I've seen other models where you have 4, 5, 6 different pillars. That tells me if one pillar is missing, the house still stands. In my model, if one pillar is missing, the house doesn't stand. So we need the strong foundation. And then on top of the foundation, the two pillars. The first one, a stable and capable delivery system. So I don't care what your business is, you need to deliver services or products to your customer. And that needs to be a stable and capable system. And then you need a continuous improvement culture, which this whole session next week is about culture. I'm going to focus on the foundation piece here. So the foundation piece is the customer focus and leadership piece. So the 4 blocks that make up the foundation piece are vision and mission. So I believe every organization should have a vision and mission statement that defines for the organization where we're going as an organization and why we chose that direction. So to me, the vision statement is the direction we choose to go as an organization. And the mission statement is why we chose that direction. So it's so important that we have those for the organization. So we have some direction as an organization of where we're going. The next foundation piece is value analysis and value proposition. So what value do you add to the market today? Why do customers come to you? And then the question is, can you provide more value? So what is your value proposition to provide more value to differentiate you from your competitors? Those need to be aligned with the vision and mission statement. If there's misalignment there, then we're not going to meet the vision and mission statement. Next is the strategy and tactics. So what are the strategy and tactics to provide that value proposition to the market? So how are we going to do that? And then again, those strategy and tactics need to be aligned with the value propositions that's aligned with a vision and mission statement. Then lastly is the performance metrics. So I put performance metrics in the foundation because they're so important, and people overlook the importance of performance metrics. So if we have the wrong metrics, we're going to get the wrong behaviors. Wrong behaviors, we're not going to meet the strategy and tactics. If we don't meet the strategy and tactics, we're not going to meet the value proposition, and then we're not going to achieve our vision and mission statement. So if you don't believe performance metrics are important, the example I like to give is Wells Fargo. So if people remember what the Wells Fargo scandal was, that the CEO was trying to drive up stock price. How do you drive up stock prices? You show growth in the company. How do you show growth in the company? By new accounts being opened. So what were people doing? People were committing fraud to meet the goal. That's the power of measurements. So don't overlook the power of measurement. And then I was also trained by Dr. Goldratt, who said, tell me how you measure me and I'll tell you how I'm going to behave. So people behave in the way that they're measured. If you have the wrong behaviors in the organization, look at your measurement system. You're probably not measuring people correctly if they're not behaving correctly. So that's why it's a foundation piece. And then the next level up is the root cause analysis and problem solving. So I put this as another foundation piece because what I find that most companies are terrible at is problem solving. They don't know how to systematically go through and define a problem, understand what are the primary factors to the problem and what are the root causes to the problem, and putting permanent countermeasures in place. So that's the foundation piece. I'm not going to describe all the elements of the pillars, but the main focus of this presentation is to understand the foundation piece and how critical that is for the organization. Okay, so I think we're going to do our first poll. So Amanda, if you want to launch the first poll session.
You bet. All right, everybody. So there's a poll popping up on your screen right now. So take a moment to answer that, please.
So the question is, does your organization have a vision and mission statement that is communicated to all the employees? So the key here, is it communicated to all the employees? And if I came into your organization, could I ask your employees and could they tell me what the vision and mission statement is?
Just about everybody answers, so we'll give it just another minute or second, rather. All right, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results.
Okay, so we have a overwhelming answer of yes. So 79% said yes, they do, and it is communicated to the employee, which is higher than I normally see. So that's great news. And those for the ones that have no, that's could be action item. If you don't have a vision and mission, develop a vision and mission. If it's not communicated, make sure you start communicating that to the organization. So next, I want to talk about some of the necessary conditions to becoming a high-performing organization. And so I have a picture on the screen here. And usually I ask people, if you had one word to describe this picture, what would that word be? And most people get the right answer of focus. So it's all about focus. And so many companies lose focus. So if we have that vision and mission statement, right, that's our single focus. How do we achieve that? So some of the necessary conditions that I see is, one, we must satisfy all the customer needs. So not some of the customers some of the time, not our best customer all the time, and then at the expense of all our other customers. So what customer is most important? All customers are important. So we need to satisfy all the needs of all the customers. Second is meeting the needs of the organization. So we have certain needs of the organization that are defined by the stakeholders. So the stakeholders could be our employees, our customers, our suppliers, the community. There's all types of stakeholders in the organization. We need to understand who are those stakeholders, and then are we meeting the needs of those stakeholders? Then third is establishing the mindset to achieve sustainable improvement. So if this, our belief is if the improvement isn't sustainable, then it's not an improvement. And also, what are changes in the organization that are going to be improvements? Because I see a lot of changes in organizations that don't improve the performance of the organization. That's not focus. Focusing is doing what should be done to improve the organizational performance, and more importantly, not doing what shouldn't be done. So I see so many initiatives in companies that aren't either aligned with the mission and vision, or they're not increasing the value of the customer, or it's not improving the performance of the organization. So that's our three criteria. Is it satisfying our mission and vision statement? Is it satisfying our customers' needs? Or is it improving the performance of the entire organization? If one of those three conditions is not met, then don't do it. And I see so many initiatives that get started that don't align with those three requirements. And it needs to be sustainable. So if it's not sustainable, then it's not going to be an improvement. So we don't put something in place and then 3 months later slip back to old practices. And to me, that's a cultural issue that will be discussed in the next session. And then establish that positive change in culture. So they're going to talk more next week about culture, but to me, culture is how organizations interact with each other, how the people in the organization interact, how decisions get made, how we work together as a team to solve problems. To me, that's the culture. So every organization I go into, I usually get the saying, you don't understand, we're different. Okay, so most organizations aren't that different, but what is different is the culture. So if I look at the culture in every organization's culture is different. So the how you get to operational excellence or organizational excellence is different depending on your culture. So implementations are totally different for organizations because the cultures are different. So that's an important element to understand when you're trying to become a high performing organization. How does the culture affect how we get to our goal? So one of the things we want to focus on is what are the needs of the customer? So like I said, most companies don't understand the needs of their customers. So what I want you to do as homework is do this, what's called a force field analysis. So a force field analysis defines the forces for change.
Oh, it looks like your audio.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. So the force field analysis is a tool to understand the forces for change and the forces against change. So what I'm asking people to do is just fill out the forces for change, the left-hand side here. So what are the needs of the customer? And so what you do is you list the top 5 needs of the customer. So here's an example: our response time to customer inquiries, our quality of our product or services, how reliable. So when we give them a date that we're going to deliver, are we delivering on that date? Price might be important in our customer service. So you need to define for your organization what are the top 5 needs of your customers. And then what I want you to do is to rank them. And rank is not 1 through 5, but how important that is for the customer. So you could have 2 5s, 2 4s, and a 1. Okay. So response time in this case is a 3 out of 5. Quality is 4 out of 5. Reliability is a significant need for the customer. Price isn't so significant, and either is customer service. And then once you rank those, then I want you to define how well you're satisfying those needs. And this is just a plus, minus, or equals. So we're not doing very good on response time. We're doing great on quality. We're not doing good on reliability. We're okay on price, and we're okay on customer service. So this is sort of give you a benchmark of what are the needs of your customers, how well are you doing, and how important are those needs for the customers. Now, the forces against change is a later discussion about, okay, if reliability is a 5, very important for the customer, and we're not doing very well, what's preventing us from doing better? What's the forces that are preventing us from doing better on reliability? Those are the forces against change. I'm not asking you to fill out that section, but in the future, right, what you want to do is understand, why can't we get better here? What's preventing us? And there's typically a lot of analysis that needs to be done to do that. Then likewise, we want to do the same for the organizational needs. So what are the needs of the organization? So for example, profitability, again, quality, cost control, market diversity, and product diversity. And again, you're going to rank those in terms of importance for the organization, and then define how well you're satisfying those needs. And again, have multiple people in your organization do this, and then you'll start to see the misalignment. So, or you can do it in groups, do multiple groups in the organization, have the groups fill out the top 5 for each, rank them in terms of importance, and then score how well you're doing. And if you don't have the same answers, then there's misalignment. Again, we're looking for that alignment. Okay, so I think we're ready to launch the next poll session. Is that correct, Amanda?
You got it. Poll is launched.
Okay, so can most of your employees name the top 2, 3 needs of your customers and your organization?
All right, I think we've got everybody here. I'm going to close it in just a second.
Okay, so we have the results here. So 59% said yes, which wasn't as good as our first poll, and 41% said no. So again, if no, then the next thing you need to do is understand, do we understand as an organization what are the needs of the organization, what are the needs of the customer, and then is that communicated throughout the organization of the top 2 or 3 needs of each of those? That helps us start to achieve alignment. Okay, so next we're going to start talking about mindset. So what is mindset? It's basically the belief or way of thinking that determines our behaviors, outlooks, or mental attitude, and that impacts the outcome of what we're trying to achieve. So we have that for our personal life, and then what is organizational mindset? So it's basically the same thing from an organization perspective. So what is the way of thinking or beliefs within the organization that drive its outcomes? So when we look at culture, so culture is, the way I define it, is underlying beliefs, assumptions, and values within an organization, and the ways of interacting to contribute to a unique social and psychological environment. And so mindset is in the middle here. So we have attitude, behaviors that turn into actions that achieve results, and then determine our performance. Those performance feed back into attitudes. And this is a cycle, right? So it's like we want to improve the attitude, which improves the behavior. Do we take the right actions? It drives the right results, and it drives the right performance. So how we do that as an organization is really from the cultural perspective. So when we look at mindset for effectiveness, what are the elements that need to be in place for mindset for effectiveness? So first of all is conscious awareness. So what is conscious awareness? So that's being aware of what's happening in your environment. So not just in your role or your function in the organization, how your role or function is affecting others in the organization. So it's understanding the cause and effect between the actions I take and the outcomes for those actions for other people in the organization. So I'm amazed how many companies I go into, the people that I talk to don't understand who their internal supplier is, and they also don't understand who is their customer. Well, if I don't understand who is my customer, how do I understand what their needs are? So very few people in the organization have the external customer as their customer. Most people have internal customers, and they don't understand what are the needs of their customers. So if I don't understand the needs, how do I understand if I'm giving them what they need to be successful in their role? So first step is understanding who is my customer, who is my supplier, what actions am I taking that are causing problems for my customer, or what actions are my suppliers taking that are causing problems for me, and have we defined those? Then what I see is that because most people don't understand who their customer supplier relationship is and don't understand why things are happening, we have this reactive attitude. So if we don't do good problem solving, we're reacting to problems all day long. And so we're dealing with issues after they occur. And so a lot of chaotic things are going on because of this reactive attitude. Now we need a shift in perspective. So we need to think or do something differently. So we can't get different results by continuing to do the same things over and over. And a lot of times when I go into companies and I see something that's going on, I'm like, so why do you do it that way? The number one answer, been doing it that way for 50 years, or that's the way we've always done it. Okay, so if we always did what we always, if we always do what we always did, we always get what we always got. I think that was a Henry Ford statement. So we got to do something different. So we got to have a shift in perspective. And perspective is just looking at the situation from a different angle. Okay, so it's all about perspective. Next is a change in paradigm. So paradigm is a way of thinking. So in order to do something different, we need to challenge our assumptions about why we're doing certain things and why we believe that those actions are achieving the correct outcomes. So if we have the incorrect outcomes, we probably aren't doing something correct. And I like to use the Seinfeld episode with George is like, if everything I do is wrong, the opposite must be right. Okay. So sometimes we got to do something opposite to get better results if we're not getting results we are achieving today that we really want for the organization. And then move to a proactive attitude. So proactive attitude is preventing issues before they occur. So we need to switch from that reactive to proactive. And Benjamin Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So organizations don't understand how much capacity is wasted by dealing with problems after they occur. Benjamin Franklin would say 16 times the capacity. So if we can prevent problems from happening, we're going to free up 16x of people's capacity. What's that worth to you as an organization? It's significant. So when we start to stabilize things and things become more predictable and we're not reacting and we're being proactive, the amount of capacity that's freed up of your resources is significant. So a lot of companies I talk to, we can't find good people. We can't find good people. You have good people. If we could switch them from reactive to proactive, we're going to significantly increase the capacity of what you have in-house already. Then last is inactive attitude. So this is actively creating the future that you want through consistent action and learning. So as we become more proactive, we start to understand how to prevent problems. We're good problem solvers. Now we can create our future based on that consistent learning and action that we take that are aligned with the goals of the organization. So those are the elements for mindset. So let's talk about conscious awareness. So regardless of the type of issues we are facing, we must be excellent in cause and effect thinking. So what is the effect? It's the outcome of some result or consequence of some action that we take. So we take some action, it results in some outcome. That's the effect. What's the cause? The cause is something that brings about the effect. What's the root cause? it's the initiating cause or a condition or a causal chain that leads to the outcome or effect. So what this says is that one problem creates another problem, which creates another problem, which creates another problem, which creates the effect that we're seeing. To be good problem solvers, we need to work through that causal chain and get to the root cause. If we get to the root cause and put in a solution, those intermediate problems go away. But a lot of times I see companies focused on the effect and putting in solutions to address the effect and not the cause. So what that does is that creates more work for people and doesn't solve the problem. So now we have people that aren't productive because they're doing all these extra activities to reduce the effect when they should be focusing on fixing the cause.
Max, do you think you could give just a generic typical example of that to paint a picture for everybody?
Yep. So I see in companies all the time where they might have quality issues. So they make something incorrect. Either we had a customer complaint of something that they weren't happy with, or we have something that wasn't done correctly and it's got to go back and be redone. And so they're like, well, so to prevent that from happening again, let's put another inspection. So let's have somebody review that before it moves on to the next step. So we're inspecting it for correctness. And it's like, okay, so now we got another step in the process. We didn't get to the root cause at quality at the source where the problem was created. And then we don't solve the problem. So we're still dealing with the quality issue and we have more steps in the process to deal with it. And we don't find them and we still have the complaints. So I don't care if it's in processing paperwork or making a product or delivering a service. It doesn't matter that there's something that's not to the customer specifications. And then we try to put inspection steps to prevent that from happening. I see it all the time. So I don't know if people can resonate with that example. Okay, so then the reactive mindset. So what I see in companies is that all problems get the same level of attention. So we call it all problems are created equal. But what's the logic behind that? So our objective is to make sure that all processes are highly reliable. So that means when we execute the process, that we can determine what the outcome is going to be. That's reliability. Okay. And then I don't think anyone would disagree that that's what we need to achieve. But what happens is we take actions to deal with problems in a timely manner. So when a problem comes up, it's like, oh, we need to fix that problem immediately. So then what happens is if we're inundated with problems, resources don't have sufficient time to do the analysis on the problems. And then what happens is resources are overwhelmed dealing with issues. And at the same time, there's other tasks that demand our time, right? We got a daily job we need to do, not just fixing problems, delivering services and products. And then what happens is resources spend time on non-value added activities, reacting to problems, and productivity and quality is reduced. So one of the mindsets that I see that's driving this negative effects here is that problems are treated with the same level of priority. All problems aren't created equal. So that's a mindset shift. It's like there's different levels of problems within companies that have different risks for the companies. Problems with highest risk to the company should be highest priorities. Problems that have less risk should not be worked on. They should be set aside and dealt with when they become a higher priority, once we get the highest priorities problems fixed. So what should the mindset be? Problems are priorities based on risk to the organization or risk to the customer. And again, our goal is the same, to strive to be highly reliable. But what happens here is the problems with the highest risks are prioritized. Then resources have the proper time to deal with problems. So we're being more proactive on fixing those problems. And hopefully we're getting to the point where we're preventing those problems. Then resources permanently solve the problems. Then there are fewer demands on our time. Resources spend more time on value-added activities, and productivity and quality increases. So that's the mind shift from reactive to proactive. So when we look at an organization, we want to understand where's the leverage. So where's the leverage point in the organization? So what is leverage? So leverage is a force that is applied to an object when something such as a lever is used. So in the organization, there are leverage points where we can do a little bit of effort and get a lot of gain. Okay, so leverage is the ability to influence situation of people so that you can control what happens. So in system thinking, leverage is a place in the system structure where a solution can be applied, and then sorry about that, and that results in big gains for the company. And so I've seen 40%, 60%, 200% improvement in performance by focusing on just a few key elements and fixing those problems, and it results in huge effects for the company. So again, all problems aren't created equal. If we understand where the leverage points are and we focus our resources, again, that word focus, in the right areas, we can get big gains with very little effort. Okay, so that's some of the mind shift around achieving organizational excellence. Next, I want to talk about system thinking. So a lot of people aren't trained in systems thinking. So system thinking is a different mindset. And it's taken me a long time to be able to understand system thinking. So Dr. Goldratt, I was trained by personally, was an expert in system thinking. There's another person out there called Russell Akoff that was a systems thinker. So if you Google those two people, Russ Akoff or Dr. Ellie Goldratt, you'll see a lot of videos around system thinking. And so I'm all about effectiveness, not so much about efficiency. So what is effectiveness? So I like to use an example here. So our goal is to flow work to our customer demand. And what I have is two rowing crews here. So the rowing crew at the top is everyone's rowing in sync. And when everyone rows in sync, what happens to the boat? It goes in a straight line. So it's all about synchronization and everyone working together as a team to achieve the goal. So that to me is effectiveness. In this second boat here, this second rower is 3 times more efficient than everybody else. By him being more efficient, the boat goes off course. So we don't want to be efficient, we want to be effective. And so what happens to the second rowing crew, there's extra effort now because that person's being efficient to get the boat back on course. So that extra effort is cost in most companies. It's extra cost to get the system back on track, either expedited efforts, overtime, outsourcing work, those types of things to get the system back on track. And then in system thinking, also, one important part of a rowing crew is the coxswain. So the coxswain is the one, and if you look at value added versus non-value added, most people say he's non-value added, he's not rowing, right? The people that are rowing are the value adders. But the coxswain is sitting there. He's an important part of that team because he's keeping everybody in sync. So it's so important. He's such an important element of the team to make sure everybody's in sync. So what we need is an organization where everybody's in sync, everybody's in line, everybody's rowing at the same pace. To me, that's effectiveness. And in some cases, some people need to be less efficient to make the system more efficient. That's extremely difficult for companies to understand. And I'll give you a quick example. I was in one company and they had to make 10 products for a customer. And so within these 10 products, there was 10 panels that need to be made that go into these 10 products. So what they were doing is they started making 10 of all panel ones. So they make 10 panel ones, and then 10 panel twos, and then 10 panel threes. And they were going through and making all these panels. And then once they got all the panels made, they could start assembling. I'm like, no, it's make one, move one. So make one panel one panel two, one panel three, one panel four, make the 10, assemble that unit and move it on. And the president said, well, that doesn't make much sense. They're going to have to do 10 times more setups. Why wouldn't they, when they have the panel set up to make the first one, make all 10? That doesn't seem very efficient. I go, it's not for the person, but it is for the system. So by that person making all 10 panels to go into that first unit, that unit moves on to the next step where they could start testing it. It cuts the lead time of the whole order by less than half. It's more efficient for the system. So for the system to be more efficient or more effective, that person needs to be less efficient, which is so difficult for people to understand. So where in your organization are you driving efficiency? Again, we go back to the measurement. Where are you driving efficiency that's causing the results to not be achieved? And if you're driving efficiency everywhere, that's what's preventing you from being a more effective organization. That's a hard concept. So let's look at flow. So if we understand flow, there's three flows in any organization. So the first one is we have value-added steps that we need to convert our requirements into customer products or services. There's different value-added steps that those services or products go through, and typically there's work in process between those steps. And then we have the information flow, which flows from our customers through our organization back to our suppliers. We have the value-added flow, which flows from our suppliers to our customers. And then we have the almighty cash flow. If we want to improve cash flow, we need to either improve the information flow or the value-added flow. So I'm a proponent of improving both. And then if we improve both the information flow and the value-added flow, we're going to improve cash flow. So cash is king. So I've been in a lot of companies that are profitable, but they're out of cash. That doesn't help the organization when you're out of cash, right? We need to be profitable and we need to have cash. If we don't have cash, then what happens is we do all these extra efforts to make sure that we have the proper cash flow so we can keep the doors open and not have to wait for cash to come in or feel that we need to compromise some of our processes because we don't have the cash. So cash is king. Also, when we look at flow, we can take every activity and convert it into transformational activities or non-transformational activities. And so what poor flow looks like is we start something, we do a little bit of activity, and then that gets set aside. And then a few days later, we pick it up and we do another few activities, and then that gets set aside, and likewise. And so you can apply this to any environment. So the example I like to use is a doctor's office, right? We've all experienced going to the doctor. So what happens? I come into the doctor's office, I stand in queue to check in. So that's the red here, I'm waiting. Then they check me in. So they take my insurance information, my birth date, my cell phone number, my all that information. And they say, okay, go sit in the lobby. So then I go sit in the lobby and I wait for the nurse to come call me. And so then I'm there 40 minutes. The nurse comes in. Okay, you come back to the exam room. She takes my blood pressure and my temperature and some of my vital signs. Another about 2 minutes of value added. And then it says, oh, the doctor will be right in. 45 minutes later, the doctor comes in and he spends about 8 minutes with me. And then he says, oh, we probably should get some blood tests. So go wait in the queue to get blood tests. Then they take 2 minutes to draw my blood and then I'm out. So I'm in the system 2 hours and my total touch time is about 12 minutes. That's poor flow. I think we've all experienced that example. But the goal here isn't to reduce the transformation time. Most companies are focused on reducing this transformational time. That's not where the leverage is. So if you look at this graph, where's the leverage? It's in the time that things aren't being worked on, not the time that they are being worked on. So what does good flow look like? We come into the doctor's office, they check us in. We immediately go back to the exam room. Doctor comes in, does his analysis. I get my blood test and I'm out. So I'm in the system. The touch time isn't changing. It's still 12 minutes, but I'm only in the system maybe 25 minutes. That's improved flow. And from the customer's perspective, as the patient, you don't want to cut the doctor's time from 8 minutes to 4 minutes, right? That doesn't add value for me as a patient. That's not the focus. Okay, so improving flow, we want to reduce the non-touch time, not reduce the touch time. That's how we create flow. And in some cases, most steps need to be less efficient to make that happen. So when we look at improving organizational effectiveness, one thing we want to do is understand that flow is a primary means to drive performance. So it doesn't matter what your organization does, you want to flow that work from customer requirements when they have a need to satisfying that need for the customer. When we do flow as a primary focus, we get cost reduction as a side benefit. Now, if we have cost reduction as the primary means to drive improvement, it almost always kills flow. And again, that cost reduction mindset is being efficient everywhere. So for example, I can buy materials from our supplier and say, oh, so I want to minimize my freight cost. So to minimize my freight cost, I'll buy extra. And so what happens is I buy extra materials and I have those delivered. So now I'm saving on freight because I don't have to have multiple deliveries. I can have everything delivered in one order. But what happens? So by that person being efficient at minimizing freight costs, it ties up more cash, right? Because now we got to pay for those materials that are going to take months and months to consume. So now we have a cash flow issue, and we have possibility of deterioration of that product or material. We have extra handling because now we have this big, massive bunch of material that came in that we got to deal with. It takes up all our space. So now we're running out of space. So there's all these negative effects that happen, which increase costs. So the objective is trying to reduce costs, but it ends up as an effect of increasing costs and killing flow, especially cash flow in that case. So when we build a high-performing organization, there's a 4-step process we go through. So the first step is what to change. So what to change is the managerial know-how. What do we need to have as managers, and how do we understand what's the cause and effect of the issues that we're dealing with? So we're dealing with all these issues. We have problems that come up. What's the cause of those problems? So the managerial know-how is how do we take the effects that we're seeing today and boiling it down to the causes or root causes of what's creating those problems. Second step is what to change to. So that's the operational know-how. So in order to get different results, we got to do something different. So what do we need to do different to get better results? That comes through education, understanding system thinking, understanding how to do proper problem solving, how to look at things from different perspectives, changing paradigms for people. Then third step is how to cause the change. So that's the psychological know-how. So how do we get everyone in the same mindset? How do we make sure that people are aligned? How do we have the right measurements in place to drive the right behaviors? Then the last step is to how to sustain the change. So this is really important. When we make a change, we need to make that change permanent. And so I just went to a workshop, and the guy in the workshop said one of their mantras for their company is slow to start, fast forever. Okay, so if we spend the time to do the analysis, to put the proper solution in place, yes, that's going to take us time and effort, and it's going to be slow. So slow to start to achieve fast forever. Okay, then the last step is sustainability. That's the behavioral know-how. So that's changing the behaviors in the organization. It's getting that new behavior until that new behavior becomes habit. So people are creatures of habit. So we like to do the same things. And to do better results, we got to change those habits. So when we make a change, we got to have a system in place to reinforce that positive side of that change of, yes, it might be less efficient for me, but if I understand it's making it better for the organization, right? That's part of the psychological know-hows, is that when I do something different, I know that it's going to be a positive change for the organization, and it's creating many positive effects in the organization. And then making sure that I do that activity over and over and over till it becomes habit. Once it becomes habit, then it'll stick. If it doesn't become habit, people will transition back to old practices. Okay, so that's our session for today. I think we want to launch the last poll session.
Coming up right now.
So the last poll is, do you feel the organization has a competitive advantage in your market? So can you choose your customers? And do you have uncontested market space? But here's all our information. Delaney and I post on LinkedIn 3 times a week, our website, and then we have a lot of videos on our YouTube channel of different mindset necessary to be a high-performing organization. So I encourage people to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have videos that we post every week. And then we'll open up for a question after Amanda shares the results. Okay, so a lot of people feel that they have a competitive advantage in your market. Okay, so companies that I see in the blue ocean, Google, Amazon, right? So you should be able to experience exponential growth if you're have a competitive advantage in your market. Okay, I think now we're opening up for questions.
And you're welcome to either drop those in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask the question that way, you're welcome to do that as well.
And I see one in the chat. How do your senior leaders ensure everyone is in sync? So that's a great question. And so a lot of companies I see are challenged with communications. I'd like feedback of people on the call. And a lot of times that vision and mission doesn't get communicated. So I think communication is a key to the organization of communicating that and reinforcing that, and then having the right measurements in place to make sure that that communication is understood, and that we have the right measurements to align everybody in the organization. So that's one of the ways I see to get everybody in sync. And that's why I put that performance measurements in the foundation piece of my house, because it's so important.
I'm just curious, Max, as you reflect upon the group's answers to the, few poll questions that we put out there, are kind of the results of this collective group from the webinar series? Are they consistent with what you typically see with the clients you work with?
I usually see the opposite. I see that most times I go out and ask people, some people aren't even aware that there's vision and mission statement. And if I ask what are the top initiatives, I get all types of different answers. And I actually read a Harvard Business Review article about an organization where the CEO every month met with the top managers of the company, and they reviewed the top 5 initiatives every month. The people from the article went and interviewed managers in that company. Only 55% could name one initiative. Nobody could name all 5, and they reviewed it monthly. And that's typically what I see. It's like the vision and mission isn't communicated. It's like people can't name the top initiatives, and they don't have a competitive advantage.
Right. So do you feel, I guess, that people, leadership tends to overcomplicate it by not having too sharp of a focus, kind of like what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, so a lot of that stems from lack of focus.
Right. Got it. And then Delana asked a question to the group, just wanting thoughts in terms of getting buy-in from leadership and how difficult that is. What are your thoughts about that, Max? And how do you go about getting that buy-in?
Yeah, so I think part of that's the conscious awareness. It's like sometimes leadership's so removed from the operations, they don't understand what's going on. So it's getting them to understand what are the main issues in the organization that the employees are faced with, and then helping them understand why those things are happening. But leadership, it can't change without leadership's involvement, right? So leadership doesn't understand those issues, then they can't address them. So part of it is that conscious awareness to make sure that they understand what are the issues that the organization's facing.
Any pointers to the people, who are joining us today for this webinar series, who represent lots of different roles within their respective organizations? Any, key pointers to try to help them get the attention of the most senior leadership so that they can buy into, investing in this thought process?
Yep. So one of the techniques I used is questioning. So you can't tell leadership, oh, it's like you don't understand what's going on, right? This is happening, and that's happening, and this is happening, right? So I would start with the vision and mission statement and the key performance indicators. And then if you're not achieving your goals in terms of your KPI, start asking questions. And questioning is an important technique of getting people's awareness and buy-in. So if I ask the right questions, instead of telling people, it's like, oh, our on-time delivery performance is terrible. Do you know our on-time delivery performance is terrible?
Right.
Yes. Ask leadership, why is our on-time delivery performance so terrible? Right? And see if they can answer it. And if they can't, then start a discussion around, let's explore this a little bit deeper and see if we can understand it as a group, why our delivery performance is so poor. And then you start having that open discussion and getting that conscious awareness of what's happening in the organization and why we're seeing these, again, the KPIs. We're going to talk in the last session about leading indicators and lagging, but if we have a lot of lagging indicators about, oh, our delivery performance last month was terrible, well, it's too late, right?
Right.
It's a lagging indicator. What are the leading indicators that we should be having? They're telling us that we're going to have the correct performance in the future.
Right. Right. Trying to think. Excellent. Well, I would say it's a real good start. Even, kudos to everybody who, made it a priority to join us today, because obviously you're thinking about and you're recognizing the opportunity to help your organization to evolve. Max, one last question I have. I guess I'm just curious. You had mentioned a couple times throughout your presentation, oh, it doesn't matter if you're a manufacturing organization or a service organization. I'm just curious, what, if any, differences do you see in what you're telling us relative to anyone who might be joining us and wanting to implement this in a service organization versus a manufacturing organization or even a healthcare organization?
Yeah, so the difference I see is like in manufacturing, a lot of times they're focused on the transformation process of materials from start to finish, right? I physically can see it, but in a service organization, I can't see it, right?
Right.
People working independently doing their task, and it's like there's no physical output of that process step, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things from a service organization is to understand what are those steps that we do to satisfy our customer needs,
Mhm.
and getting those steps documented and understanding who's responsible for executing those steps. Because a lot of times I see what I call people swimming in other people's lanes. So
Mhm.
people are doing stuff outside their area of responsibility because some problem happened and I need to take extra effort to get it fixed.
Right.
So if we see the effect of people swimming in other people's lanes, that's a problem that needs to be addressed.
And what do you find that's most often a symptom of?
Not clear responsibility and lack of accountability within the process.
And maybe even lack of a process?
Yes.
Out of curiosity? Okay.
A lot of people say, oh, we don't have a process. You have a process because you're delivering, right? It's like
Right.
maybe the process isn't clearly defined who does what, and then there's no accountability built in the process so that I can understand when something goes off track.
Right.
And again, that contributes to the reactive mindset that we talked about.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Max. Last call for questions. Make sure you drop those in the chat if you have any. And while we wait for those to come in, just a quick reminder for everyone that we will be sending out a follow-up email after today's session that includes that document that Max was showing earlier. It is a fillable PDF, so you'll be able to type right in it if you don't want to print it out and fill it in manually. You can do that. So we'll be sending that out along with some key takeaways from today's session. And just a quick, also another reminder, because we had a couple of folks who asked, we will be sending out the links to the recordings from the sessions. We're not going to do that until after the third and final session on the 26th. So of course, we want you to attend the sessions in person so you can get your questions answered and make sure you're, catching everything that we're sharing on the live webinar. We do have, let's see, a question that came in from Chris. Chris says, I was wondering about the 4-step process and which area of the company should take charge of each step. Step 1 seems like executive, 2 operations, but I'm not sure about 3 and 4. Maybe floor management for sustaining the change.
Yes, that's a great question. So step 3 is difficult to answer until you get through step 1 and 2, because we don't know what the solution is. So once you define what the solution is, then it's getting the right people aligned that are going to be responsible for implementing that. Hopefully that answers that question. And then the sustainability piece is understanding those processes that are affected by that change, and then getting that accountability built into those processes. And I'm a big proponent of visual management, getting that visual management in place so we can see if the process is performing correctly. And in a service organization, that's even more difficult, right? How do I see where we are in the process, and is that process performing as planned?
Right.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Max. All right, very good. Well, if there are no other questions, we will go ahead and give you 5 minutes of your time back this morning. So like I said, keep an eye out for that follow-up email, and we look forward to having all of you join us next week. Same time, it'll be 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll be talking a lot about building your company culture. So Elizabeth and I will be presenting that session. So we look forward to having you join us then. We hope all of you have a great day. And thank you so much again for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.